Hello. Hello out there in TV land. For you guys, I wore makeup. I wouldn't have worn it just for the live people, just so you know. Actually, I should probably start with a joke, just because one of the things I want to talk about now is the why. If I were to give this talk at the beginning, it wouldn't really matter how compelling it was what I say, because if the food didn't taste good, it doesn't matter what I say scientifically. So hopefully, I haven't seen a lot of stuff go back, so hopefully you enjoyed everything so far. And oh my God, that's so cute. Can you show these two dogs? Is there any, you guys, this is what's great about taking a class in person. You got to see these two. They're just both asleep. That is just, is that sweet? Seriously. Everyone, if your name is Linda, you must. Is that not the cutest thing ever? Oh yeah, and now the news. Saturated fat is not good for you. Okay, so here I am. I'm having my second beverage of the day. I've already had my pot liquor, and now I'm having my hibiscus tea. Delicious. All right, so when I started teaching cooking in the year 2000, of course, I was already vegan. And I didn't teach this type of eating because I wasn't eating this way. And when I started teaching this way about 10 years ago, I don't really advertise. I call it more like unprocessed. I don't really say what it is. Because if I said to people, hey, do you want to come to a cooking class? We're not going to use any animal products or dairy or sugar or oil or salt or alcohol. Doesn't that sound like fun? No, not really. Nobody would come. But that's what it is. But I don't like to explain the why until I give you guys enough food. They've had, I think, 7 out of the 10 recipes. Because if the food sucks and you don't like it, it doesn't matter scientifically why it's good for you. Now, then again, you got people like Dr. McDougall have said he would eat cardboard every day if it meant another day with his wife, Mary. But most people, the food's got to taste good or they won't eat it. So if you like it, let me tell you why it's good for you and why I choose to eat this way. But first, I will start out with a little story because I sometimes do these things called lunch and learn. So if any of you guys work for a company, like you guys, I think, work for a company, it would be very useful to have me there. I've done these at like companies like Universal, where they'll have like maybe, I don't know, 60 people come. And I feed them, I'll do maybe 3 or 4 recipes and they'll get samples, maybe not huge amount. Because the idea is if you're a human resource person, if your people are sick, it's costing you money. So you want your employees to be as healthy as possible. And so I was doing one of these at a direct mail company. Remember, there was 66 people, and there was also a food truck outside. It was right during lunch. And this man comes walking through, and most of the people are seated. He goes, hey, lady, is there going to be any bacon in this class? And I said, no, sir, I'm sorry. He goes, well, then I'm getting the hell out of here. And it sort of kind of created a little bit of a negative vibe to the beginning of my class. And so in order to get composure and get the people back, I said, look, guys, you could go to the food truck and get bacon, but let me just tell you that there are worse things in life than giving up bacon. And people are like, yeah, what? And when you think about it, really, you don't like bacon because you like eating a pig's butt. It's because you like sugar, fat, and salt. That's really what it is. Because if I just took a pig's butt and boiled it, you probably wouldn't like it. You like sugar, fat, and salt. That's what we're going to talk about. That's the components in food, the chemicals that make it so addictive. So I said, look, there are worse things in life than giving up bacon. I said there was a rabbi and a priest, and they were on an airplane. And, priests, what they look like, rabbi, a little yarmulke, and they noticed they were basically in the same profession. And so the priest said to the rabbi, he said, Rabbi, I know in your faith you can't eat pork, but have you ever tasted pork? And the rabbi said, look, priest, you must promise never to tell my congregation, but one time and one time only before entering rabbinical school, I did have a BLT. And the priest says, don't worry, your secret is safe with me. And so the rabbi said, well, priest, you must know that now what I'm going to ask you, have you ever broken your vow of celibacy? And the priest says, well, you, Rabbi, must promise never to tell my congregation, but one time and one time only before entering the seminary, I actually did have sex with a woman. And the rabbi goes, sure beats bacon. So, the point is what I'm asking you to do may sound drastic, to not eat animals, especially dairy, and maybe either not eat sugar, oil, or salt, or decrease. I'm never going to ask you to not eat sex. As a matter of fact, when we get into the brain chemistry part of this lecture, I'm going to actually ask you to have more sex. Because if you were having more sex, you would have more dopamine and you wouldn't need the hyperpalatable food so much. Therefore, everyone turn to it. We've got you guys are so far apart, you're just going to have one of these ladies. Sorry. No, just kidding. We're not going to make you actually do that now. But anyway. So why do I eat this way? Well, would I eat this way if I didn't have to? I don't know, but I have to, and here's why. So I became vegan in 1977 when I was a freshman at the University of Pennsylvania. I'd always wanted to be vegan, even though I didn't have a word for vegan, but I always knew I loved animals. We had a dog since I was 4 years old, and the dog was always my best friend. As a matter of fact, the dog was only the member of the family that I ever ended up actually liking. Sorry, my sister might be watching, with the exception of my lovely sister. All right, so anyway, when I was a pre-vet, I wanted to be a veterinarian. I went to the University of Pennsylvania. I remember growing up, I asked my mom if I could not eat meat, not be vegetarian. I was born in 1960. It was like, we didn't have the internet back then. We didn't have Neil Barnard or Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine telling us that it's not only safe, but actually the healthiest way to feed a kid. And so she wouldn't let me be vegan or vegetarian, but she was very respectful in that she didn't make things that I wouldn't, like, for instance, like if you had a fish, that a lot of times it would come with the head on it. Like she wouldn't make anything that looked like an animal. Like I couldn't eat things like ribs or things with bones, but she would make like chili and maybe it had some meat in it, or maybe tuna fish. But things that didn't really look like animals, I ate. And things that looked like them, I didn't eat. Because if I saw the bone or the face, it would really freak me out. Plus, we were Jewish. And so we weren't already eating, pork or shellfish or crabs or lobsters or clams or shrimps or mixing milk with meat. And I say that because in a way, it's kind of a good thing because you develop taste preferences for what you habitually eat. And since I never had cheeseburgers or bacon or pepperoni pizza, these weren't things I weren't craving because I never had them, or lobster or things like that. So we ate very few meats really as Jews that kept kosher. We had some, like maybe it was some lamb, there was very few actually animals that we ate. And anyway, which was good because I didn't have to develop a taste for them. But when I went to college, very first day, we were assigned to work for a veterinarian because I was on scholarship for becoming a veterinarian. I was pre-vet. And the very first day at work, the doctor handed me a tank of like 100 salamanders, living salamanders. And he said, here, I need you to cut their heads off. And I'm like, why? And he goes, well, we're doing protein lens regeneration experiment in the amphibian, and all I need is their eyes. And I should have said no, but there's this thing where you see a guy in a white coat, and if you think your future depends on it. I mean, it wasn't my decision wasn't right, but I did cut the head off of one salamander, and I literally puked my guts out, and I said, I can't do this. And I went to the student health center, and I said to God, I remember saying, I will never eat, wear, or experiment on any of your animals again. So I instantly became a vegan September 1st, 1977. And then I was relegated to the lab room, the dishware room, where the rest of the semester I just washed the slimy equipment. And then I basically ended up almost failing at the University of Pennsylvania because I wouldn't dissect the rat and I wouldn't do the cat. And I didn't have the rights that people have today. They have things they can do. Neil Barnard was alive, but we were almost the same age, so I don't know if he would have been able to help me then. I tried switching to business major in Wharton. Boy, that didn't do good. I tried being a French. Anyway, ended up dropping out of college, going back many years later here to Cal State Northridge. But anyway, so the problem is I was a junk food vegetarian or a vegetarian because I just ate crap. I was eating at the dining hall, so I'd eat potato chips, I'd eat soda. That was vegan. You can have candies, cakes, cookies, pies, and ice cream can be vegan, but doesn't mean it's healthy. And so I got even fatter. Like I said, I was almost 200 pounds in my 20s. I became first fat at the age of 5, but by the age of 11, I got up to 160. For somebody that's not 5 feet tall, that's considered obese. So I just continued to get fatter, eating a very unhealthy version of the vegan diet. I always say that my 4 food groups were candies, cakes, cookies, pies, or candies, cakes, cookies, pies, and ice cream. My breakfast was usually a Coke Slurpee with 8 pumps of vanilla syrup. My lunch was a Dr. Pepper 48-ounce big gulp because back in the day, guys, that was the largest size you can get. You can now get a 256-ounce soda. with free refills at 7-Eleven. But back then it was 48 ounces. So, you know, lunch and breakfast was like 800 calories of basically caffeine and sugar. And I ate lots of candies, cakes, cookies, pies, and ice cream. And I became a pastry chef. Having a food addict be a pastry chef is like having, you know, the fox guard the hen house. It's not, or having like an alcoholic be a bartender. It's not the best idea. Anyway, so I did this. I ate everything except for fruits and vegetables till I was 43 years old. I didn't eat a single fruit and vegetable with the occasional broccoli. For some reason, I like broccoli. And I think that's what saved me from having full-blown colon cancer, because basically at the age of 43, on January 1st, 2003, I woke up bleeding profusely. And I had what's called precancerous polyps. These are edematous polyps, and my colon was riddled with them. I had an HMO at the time, and they couldn't remove them during the procedure. They normally have these calipers, and when they see it, they just take it out. But because my colon was in such a state of ill health from years of just not eating any fiber, really, they couldn't remove that without risking serious infection. So they said I would have to come back and have surgery to remove them. And I'm like, I'm not doing that, because when I was 19 years old, I went in for what was a same-day operation to remove, I think it was like a cyst or something, and I ended up in the hospital on IV and oxygen for 6 weeks. I was allergic to the anesthetic, and I almost died. And I remember, you know, I was a respiratory therapist, and I remember them like coming with the bag, and the next thing would have been the ventilator. And it's like, I'm so afraid of anesthesia. Like, you haven't, like, you ever take your dog to the vet, and then when they go into the secret back room, the dog puts all 4 paws down and won't go with the vet? That's how me and anesthesia are. So I said, no, thank you. So instead, I checked into a place called the Optimum Health Institute in Lemon Grove, California on July 6th, 2003, with a Coke Slurpee in one hand and a Dr. Pepper in the other hand. And I said goodbye to my 2 best friends. And it was there that I first learned from anyone, but let alone doctors and nurses, that what we eat actually has a profound effect on not only how we look and feel, but what diseases we get and what diseases we can reverse. Oh my God, you're eating the Strata. Is it good? Great. It is like, guys, can you show your piece? You're an actor. This is a very famous actor, director, Kurt Kohler, by the way. He's related to Ann Cassie. This is my birthday meal. I'm telling you, this is so good. And it was created by accident because I couldn't remember what I did when I was doing something else. I know, I love this. And the next day it's even better because the pieces get like perfect. Like you can get like perfect squares. Okay, so, I hate when I interrupt myself. What was I talking about? Does anybody? Oh yeah. So, Optimum Health. There were people there that were much sicker than I were. There were people there with AIDS, with lupus, with Lyme's disease, with brain tumors, with brain cancer. And they came back on Fridays to give testimonials how eating this way cured them. And I'm like, well, these people their diseases were uncurable. And by the way, uncurable only means that your doctor hasn't had a patient that was cured from that. Don't believe everything they say when they say something's uncurable. I'm thinking, well, God, this is going to be a piece of kale because I don't even have cancer yet. It's pre-cancer is what they're calling it. They said if they weren't removed, I would get cancer. And my grandma did die of colon cancer, and my uncle did have 80% of his colon removed, so I did have a strong family history. So I just did what they said, which was eating pretty close to the diet I eat now. It wasn't cooked, but I don't think it was the rawness that was what saved me. But it was unprocessed. It was whole food, plant-based. It was free of sugar, oil, flour, alcohol, salt. There was no caffeine or chocolate. It happened to be raw, but I think if it was cooked, I would have done fine. But anyway, I stayed on this diet for about 2 years, and 6 months after being on this diet, I went back to the HMO. I was trying to get a colonoscopy because the sigmoidoscopy didn't go all the way up, and I was concerned that I could still have these polyps. Well, they would only do a sigmoidoscopy, but what was interesting is I had the exact same gastroenterologist doing the procedure. And he kept saying to me, where did you go? And I like, what do you mean, where did I go? He goes, well, where did you have the surgery? And I'm like, well, what surgery? He goes, well, your colon is clear, clean, pink, and vascular like a newborn baby. And they actually have cameras. So they were able to take picture of every polyp I had, and it was printed out in my chart. They knew how many centimeters it was. They knew where it was in the colon. He says, they're all gone. What did you do? And I said, well, I just changed my diet. And he goes, well, that's impossible. And he stormed out of the room. And the other doctor, another GI doctor who was assisting, a female, I think she might have been from India based on her accent. When he was out of the room, she whispered to me, she goes, I believe you. And right then, a light, like Oprah talks about the light bulb moment, I was like, wow, this is like incredible. So I took a leave of absence from my job as an activity director at a retirement home, and I went to culinary school, not because I was trying to be a chef, but because I couldn't sustain the Optimum Health diet. It was pretty austere. People think the ultimate weight loss diet is bland. No way. That was bland. There was no seasoning. There was just, bleh. I mean, you know, when I was really sick, I could do it. So I did it for about 2 years, all the while still hoping to get a colonoscopy. But finally, Charles's insurance changed 2 years into it. I got a private doctor. I got a PPO, and I had a colonoscopy, and my colon once again was fine. And I did what any good addict does, is I went out and then started eating some of the stuff that I ate before I got sick. Now, I never went back to white sugar, never did that, or white flour, never went back to Slurpees or soda, thank God. But, you know, I started doing what addicts do and rationalize, thinking, well, you know, if it's agave, it's okay, because agave is worse than sugar, guys. It's over 90% fructose. It's metabolized in the liver. That's when it kind of hit the scene, was in 2003. So I rationalized that that really wasn't sugar. Or, you know, if it was spelt flour, it's okay. Or if it was, you know, coconut oil, it's okay. No, just because something's less bad doesn't mean it's good. But the point was, is unfortunately, I got that, well, maybe fortunately, because I learned a lot when I was a pastry chef, and I learned to make desserts without sugar, oil, flour, salt for people that aren't food addicts like me, that can have them and their families can enjoy them. So it wasn't the best job for me, but I didn't know I was a food addict back then. So flash forward to 2008, 5 years later, still a pastry chef, still obese. And I signed up for a class called the Landmark Forum, which is not a cult, and it was based on S. And I took this weekend that I learned a lot from, and I ended up taking a one-year course after that called the Wisdom Course that was really, really fun. And every Sunday, people would come to my house for homework parties. In my class was a guy named Don Grady. If any of you are old enough to remember the show My Three Sons, which is on every day here at 7:30 on MeTV. Yeah. Na, 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 na. Well, he was the oldest son with the cleft in his chin that was really handsome. He was also one of the original Musketeers with Annette Funicello. And he was in my class, and this was June or July of 2008, and he told the group, he said, I'm really sick, but I don't want to talk about it. And I said, well, okay. I said, but you know, I had heard of these two doctors. I hadn't met them yet, but I heard of these doctors, Dr. John McDougall and Dr. Joel Fuhrman, and they actually use something called nutritional medicine to help people get well. And he said, well, you know, I'm already a patient of Dr. Fuhrman, and if the food is going to taste like this, I think I'd rather die. Well, he had advanced palate cancer, and he was also a professional singer. So they couldn't really just remove his palate, and you can't do radiation to the head. So I said, why don't you just tell me what this diet is, and I'll go on it for 3 weeks. I figure I could do anything for 3 weeks. There's a holiday called Lent. People can do stuff for 40 days. I'll say, I'll go on your diet. I mean, I knew it was vegan because it was Dr. Fuhrman. And I'm a chef. I'll make up some recipes for you, you know, that fit your thing. So I went to Dr. Fuhrman's website. I got all his books and DVDs to figure out what he could eat. And I knew that if I was going to follow this diet, I would have to get rid of all the stuff in the house, like all the candies, cakes, cookies, pies, and ice cream, which were now free because I was pastry chef and I could take them home and eat them. And so I got rid of everything. So the only thing in the freezer now would be like ice and frozen vegetables and frozen fruits. And so I was doing this diet, which is really close to the diet I eat today. And I remember like every day at 5 o'clock, I would open the freezer looking for like something good to eat, and there wasn't anything. And I'd actually like start crying, like, there's no dessert in this house. And I didn't know I was a food addict then. I didn't know anything about addiction, really. But I called up a friend of mine who is a recovering alcoholic, and I said, is this what it feels like to be an alcoholic? And she goes, well, what time do you start crying? I said, about 5. She goes, yeah, that's what we call in AA the witching hour, or the bewitching hour. And this, like, for 3 weeks, every day, I'll be like, I could get through the day, but then no sugar. I mean, come on. You know, you don't go 48 years on a drug and then, you know, all of a sudden, but the point was, is I got through it. And after the 3 weeks, you know, it was hard and everything like that, but I made a commitment to do it. And it was just amazing because the way I felt, like things that you don't realize, like you don't realize how bad sugar is until you get off of it. Like people tell me like I have really nice skin now, and yeah, I eat a lot of vegetables, but also I don't eat sugar. And I know when I worked in the nursing homes, all the old people that ate sugar were always wrinkly, and the ones that didn't, because there were a few that were raised in a healthful manner, they always had vibrant and beautiful skin and things like that. So So that was really eye-opening to me. I felt really good eating this way. And, you know, it was really interesting because after I did that, I created some recipes, which those of you that took my previous class with the nutrient-rich black bean soup, the class that I taught for probably 8 years, from 2008 till about 2 years ago, maybe. I created those recipes for him. He came to my house with his wife and another one of the previous musketeers named Mary Goff and a hypnotherapist. And we did it in our kitchen. And he said, God, this is great. Why don't you teach this? Because remember, I was already teaching at high-end culinary schools with oil and sugar and salt. I said, well, who's going to come to a class with no oil or sugar or salt? And he said, well, you'd be surprised. And that was the class that always sold out and did better. And then I went back and learned the science as to why we should eat this way. But one of the coolest things that ever happened to me, and I still tear up when I say this, is so I was telling this story about this guy, and because if it wasn't for him, this never would have happened. And I wouldn't. I mean, who's going to choose to eat this way? And the person that was sitting in that chair raised her hand and said, I'm his sister, and you helped to extend his life. So you never know who you're going to touch by eating healthy. And it was like, I couldn't stop crying, you know, it's like, you know, just, and then his wife ended up taking my class. Anyway, so the thing is we're all going to die. But as Dr. Kim Williams, the past president of the American College of Cardiology says, we're all going to die. I just don't want it to be my fault. And how you eat can actually steer the course of your health destiny. Because the thing is the problem isn't so much that we die, but that we die with such a degree of debility in this country. Having seen both my parents on ventilators, and it does make a difference. A lot of people say, oh, well, my grandma smoked and drank and she lived to 102. Your grandma didn't eat the crap that we grew up eating. And there wasn't, it was such a different time. And just because your grandma or even one of your parents lived a long time doing ill health promoting behaviors, that doesn't mean that you have some of their genetics, but there is no guarantee. So the thing is it's not just about living longer, it's about living well. And when you change your diet, you can actually change your health destiny. And health is your greatest wealth. So now, so why stick with this? Well, because I learned a lot. It's actually a really healthy way to eat. When you think about it, eating a diet of whole foods without sugar, oil, salt, or flour, it's really, if you go to other countries, it's actually just food. It's like not a diet. Like I remember when my Lyft driver picked me up, he was 27 years old. He was from Uganda, and we got into a discussion on diet, and basically he did eat, small amounts of animal products, not dairy, but he basically ate the same food as me because in his country, that was food. He ate grains like teff for breakfast and sweet potatoes and beans and things like that. And yes, they couldn't really afford animal products. They didn't have them much, but they didn't have oil and sugar and salt and flour. I mean, the way I'm proposing you eat today for optimal health, disease prevention, disease reversal, and weight loss if you need it, is what has been called food from most of human history. What Americans eat most of their calories from now, 92% of their calories are from animal products and processed food. Now, sure, our ancestors ate animals, but not to the degree they're eating them today, and not the type of animals that we're eating today. They ate the weak, the sick, the slow, the isolated, the injured. They weren't factory farmed. The animal products that our ancestors ate, first of all, it was not dairy, but they were much lower in fat and much higher in protein. They ate things like small game. They didn't eat the animals we ate, but nobody historically ever eats dairy. Now, we're going to talk about dairy first, because if you could only make one change, that would be the one thing I would recommend you do permanently, no matter who you are, whatever age you are. Dairy is not food for humans. If you drink cow's milk or even goat's milk, you're drinking lactation fluid of a mammal that was meant for that animal's baby. It's not meant for humans. Human beings are the only species that not only drink milk after maturity, but drink milk from another species. You never find anywhere in nature where, you've seen stories where a cat was orphaned and maybe a dog breastfed her, but for the most part, no species drinks the milk of another species. Cow's milk is meant for a baby calf to grow to about 800 pounds in a year. Now, even if it was healthy, it's not healthy anymore. 80% of the world's antibiotics goes to livestock. And so what's really interesting is if you're eating meat or drinking milk, you're basically consuming veterinary medicine every day. And a really interesting thing happened to me about 8 years ago. I had this like infection in my eye or above my eye, and they thought it was something called MRSA, and they wanted to immediately hospitalize me and put me on IV. Well, you know how afraid I am of like anything medical. I up until a year ago, I was getting anesthesia to get my teeth cleaned. So I can do it now all by myself without being knocked out and just not even, so I'm very proud of myself. So anyway, the point is I said, no, I said, just give me antibiotics. He goes, well, it won't work for a massive infection like this. I said, you're going to be surprised. I said, because I haven't eaten animals. I haven't taken antibiotics. And so they literally, I'm not kidding. I took the first pill and it was better. And the doctor was like, well, it's a miracle. I said, it's not a miracle. It's because I don't eat animals. I'm not resistant to antibiotics the way the rest of the world is. So actually, when I need to take them, they work. The other problem with eating animals, especially dairy, and especially if you're a female and planning on having children, or your children are planning on having your grandchildren, is that the dairy industry gives cows hormones, mass hormones, in order to get them to produce 40 times more milk than they could ever produce in nature. Plus, they're doing this while they're pregnant, meaning they're supposed to be using that milk for the baby. And that never happens in nature. You don't get pregnant while you're still nursing. That wouldn't happen to another species. So what happens is, if you're a female, you're supposed to get your period around 16, 17, 18. That's what happens in the natural world. In the United States, I got my period at 11. That's not normal. The younger you get your period, the more prone you are to having reproductive cancers like cervical or breast cancer or uterine cancer. So it's not good to get your period young. Girls are getting their periods now in this country as little as 6 years old, and they're getting pregnant at that age. Now, first of all, it's a huge problem when sexual maturity precedes emotional maturity. But the other problem is you can't get pregnant unless you have your period. And the reason they're getting their period so young is from animal products, specifically dairy, because they're having mass amounts of hormones in their cheese and butter and yogurt and ice cream. So please stop dairy. Now, if that's not enough to get you to stop dairy, this might. Now, the USDA comes around and inspects dairy farms, and they have these they look like eyedroppers, I think, and they take the milk and they put it under a slide and they look at it in the microscope. Now, our country allows a certain parts per million of pus cells in the milk. Now, if you're a female and you've ever breastfed, you know that you probably had some pain at some point from breastfeeding. You often get something called mastitis, where your nipples crack and bleed. The cows get this as well because they're being milked 24 hours a day. Well, where does the blood and pus go? Well, it goes in the milk. Now, this cow is standing for like 4 years before she's made into cheap ground beef. You think they take her for a walk? Where does she go to the bathroom? You think any of it ends up in the milk, the pee and the poop? Well, our country allows a certain parts per million of blood, pus, piss, and shit in the milk. And if there's too much blood, pus, piss, or shit in the milk, do you think the farmer is going to throw that out? No, that's where he makes your cheese and yogurt and ice cream. So if you got milk, you got shit. Enjoy. There's no reason to drink milk anymore. When I became vegan in 1977, we couldn't even find powdered soy milk. Now, you can go to any store, anywhere in the United States. We did a video, me and Gustavo, we went to the ethnic markets, we went to Walmart, we went to the 99-cent store. We found soy milk, rice milk, oat milk, quinoa milk, flaxseed milk, coconut milk, hemp milk. There's more. I'm probably rice milk, you name it, pea milk, everything can be milk. You can make it yourself, and it's cheap and it's easy and it's way better for you. You know, kids that are raised without dairy, they don't get the ear infections. They don't get sick. The reason people like milk so much, and most people will stop drinking milk. The milk alternatives are fine. They won't stop eating cheese and ice cream and yogurt, is because there's a compound in dairy that actually is addictive. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this now, because now there's a book that explains it perfectly called The Cheese Trap by Dr. Neal Barnard. There's compounds in dairy called casein. That is the milk protein. And Dr. Colin Campbell, if you're only going to do one thing after this class, I'd recommend you watch the movie Forks Over Knives. It's 87 minutes. If you got more time and you're willing to either read a book or listen to a book on tape, there's a book called The China Study written by Dr. T. Colin Campbell. He was a dairy farmer who was hired by the dairy industry to find a way to get cows to produce more milk. And he found out in his studies that the protein in dairy called casein was one of the strongest cancer promoters he ever discovered, that he was actually enabled to initiate cancer by this dairy protein. And when he fed the animals other protein, like plant protein, the cancer didn't initiate. And this book was called The Grand Prix of All Epidemiological Studies. And so there's a strong correlation between autoimmune disease and dairy, between cancer and dairy. But the reason people like cheese so much, because really it's just coagulated cow pus, but the reason people like it is because of this addictive quality. We have people like Miyoko Shiner now, who has artisan vegan cheese sold at Whole Foods with recipes from her book, Artisan Vegan Cheese, where cheese, you can make plant-based cheese that melts now, that tastes like cheese. But people that love dairy won't like it as much because it won't have this addictive quality. You see, what happened is God, or whoever you believe made people, put casein in the breast milk of all species. And so the idea is when the infant nursed, whether it was the human nursing from the mother or the bear nursing from the bear, the idea is that you wanted to keep your young close because they could be in danger if they wandered off. And so what they did is they basically made breast milk mildly addictive. And so when the infant nurses, this casein turns to a chemical compound in the brain called casomorphine, which, like morphine, is addictive. So if you ever breastfeed a baby, they can be, and then you feed them, right? And so what happens is when you have cheese, yogurt, or ice cream, you're concentrating these casomorphines, and so they really are addictive. And that's why people like Howard Lyman, who is also known as the Mad Cowboy, he's the cattle rancher that was sued along with Oprah Winfrey because when Oprah said, "I'll never eat another burger again," because he told how they were grinding up cows and feeding them to the cows, he said it was harder for him to quit cheese than it was smoking. So one of the things I want you to realize is that we don't always make our food choices based on rational things like hunger. We make them on other things like wanting to feel good. And if you don't feel good, or if you've been exposed to these things and find out they have addictive nature, we do things like that because they feel good. And oftentimes we can't stop doing them. So the best thing you could do for your health, and especially if you have children, for your children, even Dr. Lyle, who's much more lenient with me with the sugar and flour, says that everybody, especially children, must get off dairy. That's where they're finding is type 1 diabetes, not type 2, but type 1 is autoimmune disease caused by the cow's milk. So please stop drinking milk. Milk does nobody no good. And if all the science doesn't convince you, cows are sentient beings, and if you've ever seen a calf taken from her cow, please watch that video, because if you're drinking milk, you're supporting the cruelest industry of all, which is called the veal industry. And even Julia Child said at the end of her life she would no longer condone that, where they take the baby calf and put the chain around his neck in the dark for 8 days. He never gets to nurse. So please stop drinking milk. Stop eating yogurt and ice cream. We can make it taste good, and it's also the best thing you can do for your health. Okay. You want to get that magnet on the fridge so that I can show them just while we're here? Just one more thing, and then we'll stop the milk thing. But okay. So that's the thing. But it's not just milk that's addictive. There's a lot of other things. And there's a great video by Dr. Neil Barnard that you can find on YouTube called How to Magnetize a Baby, where he talks about how cheese, meat, sugar, and chocolate are the most addictive things. So next time you want to eat yogurt and ice cream, just watch this, and you can watch the video that it's linked to, because having lost a baby of my own, why would you want to do that, guys? Please don't. Even if you eat animals, please stop drinking milk. You know, it's funny because a lot of people are vegetarian for ethical reasons, but the dairy and the egg industry are probably the cruelest industries of all. So not so ethical. All right. Read The Cheese Trap and The China Study if you want to know more about the science. Well, guess what? It turns out that dairy products are not just the only things that are addictive. You could serve them one muffin if you want. You know what we're going to do is we have this live audience captive, so we're going to dole out their treats so they have to stay. So we're going to give them like their first muffin, and then we're going to finish the lecture and give them their second muffin. So they're going to have the crab muffin first. By the way, as far as Dr. Lyle liking them, he did like the crab muffin very much. So that was good. It was nice. All right. Now, So what about sugar, oil, and salt? If you read my book on processed, you know that I call them the evil trinity. You would be hard pressed to go into a grocery store and find any product that is free of sugar, oil, and salt. The truth is we don't want to eat processed food. Even if you eat meat, we don't want to eat processed food, which most Americans eat 67 to 72% of their calories from. Processed food isn't food. It may be easily affordable, readily available, and socially acceptable, but it's not food. You're not supposed to eat food that comes in a can, a box, a bottle, or a bag. You're supposed to eat food from a plant, not manufactured in a plant. And even Jack LaLanne said over 80 years ago, 13 words that if everyone lived their life by, they wouldn't be overweight and they wouldn't be sick. And those words are, if God made it, eat it. If man made it, don't eat it. Processed food, as I said, readily available, easily affordable, and socially acceptable, but it's not food. We interrupt this broadcast to show you what the cram muffin looks like. And the cram muffin is basically carrot cake, but it's baked in a muffin. And, you know, Kathy Fisher has wonderful carrot cake recipe. If this isn't sweet enough for you, it uses a little bit of dates. It's really good. The truth is it doesn't need frosting, but if you really wanted to be decadent, you could. But these, you know, we made these up for people that are going to eat something unhealthy. This will stop you. And then the people here are going, did you eat it? Poor Kurt didn't get his muffin. Oh my goodness, I forgot to cook the Brussels sprouts. Oh, I preheated it. Let me just, well, here's the thing. Sorry. I forgot. I'm just going to stick these in here. It's a good thing I can multitask, you guys. And I'm going to just put them on 400, 22 minutes. Sorry, guys. Got to wash my hand now. Oh, my God. They're good, right? Which one do you like better? Did you like this potato dish? You know, I think I went a little, I don't think even for a class, I got to do a triple recipe. If you see how much is left, maybe we could show it on the camera. So, where was I? That's the thing when you got 80. No, what was I talking about? Thank you. I know. The people are loving the cram muffins, and they haven't even had the Cinnabons yet. What? Oh, I travel with the cram muffins or the mill oat muffins from the first webinar. Absolutely. Oh, my God, because sometimes I can't get enough starch. Okay, when I walked in there, I was talking about something before. Processed food. All right, let's go. Yeah, okay. Yeah. These people are listening. All right, so here's the thing. All right. Oh, okay. These people are saying, wow. All right. Yeah, all right. Now, I haven't eaten yet today, so my brain isn't. All right, I'll get it. Evil Trinity. It is evil, by the way. You know what the Holy Trinity is? Doug Lisle, Alan Goldhammer, and John McDougall. That's the Holy Trinity. Okay, so here's the thing. There was a book that came out, I believe in 2009, called End of Overeating by Dr. David Kessler. And a few years later, a similar book came out by Michael Moss. Michael Moss is an investigative journalist, Pulitzer Prize-winning author, and he wrote a book called Salt, Sugar, and Fat, How the Food Giants Hooked Us. Dr. Kessler was the head of the FDA under Bill Clinton. One was a doctor, one was a journalist, but in these books, they both came to the conclusion that all sugar was addictive. Doesn't matter if you call it coconut sugar or stevia or agave. All fat was addictive, whether it was bacon or olive oil or peanut butter, and all salt was addictive, even the best Himalayan sea salt, blessed by the Pope. So in this book, they discovered that all three of these compounds were addictive. Now, Dr. Goldhammer says that sugar, oil, and salt are not foods. They're chemicals that we add to our food that fool the brain satiety mechanism. And if you look at what processed food is, all it is some perfect combination of sugar, fat, and salt. When people join the Ultimate Weight Loss Program, say, well, I couldn't find this in the store without sugar, fat, and salt. Of course not, because sugar's addictive, fat's addictive, salt's addictive, and processed food industry wants you to buy their product. They have to put these compounds in. The only thing you can really find in a grocery store that doesn't have sugar, fat, and salt really are maybe some canned tomato products, some canned beans, and that one kind of mustard. Otherwise, that's it, unless you buy whole food, of course, like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. So what they did is they When the processed food industry became an empire after World War II and the country became more affluent, women went back to work. They took the best doctors and brain scientists at the time to figure out the exact combination of sugar, fat, and salt to addict the average person's brain chemistry to their product. So when you see commercials on television for Lay's potato chips that say, bet you can't eat just one, most people can't. Most people can't. And they do focus groups where they actually make the food and they figure out the perfect combination of sugar, fat, and salt to addict the average person's brain chemistry to their product. Because if they put in too much sugar, too much fat, too much salt, if it's not right, then they won't like it. What they're doing is they're creating what's called a hyperpalatable product, which creates a bliss point in the brain, which most people can't stop eating. And so when I read this book in 2009, I became so angry that my brain chemistry from the time I was 4 years old and can remember was being hijacked for somebody else's profit. I stopped eating all processed food. And it didn't matter if it was Kraft macaroni and cheese in a blue and green box or Amy's macaroni and cheese, which I'm sure she's a very nice person, a reputable company. But processed food isn't food. They put sugar in every single product from baby formula to geriatric formula. They even put sugar in cigarettes to make them even more addictive and make them even more harmful. Salt's in everything, even in diet soda, and fat is in pretty much everything. And so when you have sugar, fat, and salt together in processed food and restaurant food in a process called layering and loading, you can't stop eating it. So let's go over sugar, fat, and salt, or sugar, oil, and salt at least, because I don't have a problem with fat if it's whole food fat like avocado, nuts, and seeds, unless you're overweight and a food addict and these foods are a problem for you. But let's go over sugar, fat, and salt in each one individually. But before we do that, I need a little break. This has been a rough class. Oh. You wouldn't do that with a real cigarette, would you? This stuff's bad. If you're smoking, please stop, because it doesn't matter what you eat if you're smoking. You're killing yourself. This is, and by the way, if you're an ethical vegan, these are tested cruelly on all kinds of animals. That was my public service announcement. Time Dr. Furman came for dinner, I greeted him at the door like this. It was hilarious. Hollywood Magic Store. This is not real. All right. But it looks real. All right. So we're going to start with oil. And the reason is because oil, from a culinary standpoint of the evil trinity, oil is the absolute easiest thing to get rid of in a recipe and still have it taste good, especially if you're using whole food fats like nuts, seeds, and avocado, which, if my book Unprocessed, half the recipes do use these richer whole plant foods. Now, if you have the time to watch Forks Over Knife, that will explain why oil is so deleterious to your health. Oil is not a health food, it's a hurt food. It takes about 41 olives to make a single tablespoon of olive oil. It takes 16 ears of corn to make a tablespoon of corn oil. I don't know anybody that can eat 16 ears of corn. Whenever you process a food, you make it calorie rich and nutrient poor. Everything that was healthful in the whole food, the olive, the water, the vitamin, the phytochemicals, the antioxidants, and the micronutrients are thrown away in the processing, which is often done with a harmful chemical called lye, and you're left with the non-nutritive portion of food. Oil is 4,000 calories per pound. It's the most calorically dense, nutritionally bereft food on the planet. It's 40 times as calorically dense as the healthiest food on the planet, which is vegetables. Now, oil is atherogenic, diabetogenic, and obesogenic, which means it promotes heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. It also injures what's known as the endothelial lining of your vasculature, which is the life jacket of your circulatory system. I'm not going to go into all the detail, so please consider reading Dr. Esselson's book, Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, if you want to know why it's so deleterious to your health. It basically slows you down. Now, the people that are here live, and I can also give this to Gustavo, there's a link for a YouTube video by Dr. Nick Delgado called How to Create Diabetes in 6 Hours, where he actually fed himself olive oil and he actually became a diabetic. If you remember, like somebody like James Gandolfini, who played Tony Soprano, you know, do you know what the first symptom of heart disease is in most people? Death. 50% of the people that die from a heart attack, didn't even know they had heart disease. That guy, Tim Russert, the correspondent for, was he a CNBC or some I don't know. He got a cardiac stress test. He was given a clean bill of health and he dropped out of a heart attack. Well, what did Tony Soprano or James Gandolfini eat for his last meal? Anybody know? There was alcohol, there was high fat foods, there was, I think, shrimp and foie gras. So the thing is in terms of weight loss, it's not just that the fat you eat is the fat you wear in terms of weight, but if you want to eat fat, if you're not overweight or if you don't care that you're overweight, eat nuts, eat seeds, preferably raw and unsalted, eat some avocado, maybe not too much, but don't eat oil. Oil is for cars. It's not for people. I want to just see. I want to shake this up at some point. We're still cooking, believe it or not. So, just to convince you about oil, there was a study done, and this is talked about in Dr. Esselstyn's book, Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. I believe it was Dr. Robert Vogel, and it was called the brachial artery tourniquet test. Oh, Bailey wants to come up for the lecture. Okay. Now, Bailey, do you eat oil? No, I don't eat any oil. Bailey, do you think people should eat animals? No, I don't think it. No, I don't. No, I don't think anyone should eat animals. Oh, aren't you sweet? Okay, so the brachial artery tourniquet test, what they did is they took healthy young college subjects and put a tourniquet, a blood pressure sphygmomanometer, it's called, over their brachial artery to measure their blood flow. Now, you want your blood to flow. You want all your arteries open, guys, because if the ones in the heart constrict, you have a heart attack. If the ones in the brain constrict, you have a stroke, or you have, things happen. If they happen in the penis, you have impotence. And the thing is by the time a man presents to his doctor with impotence, he's already got advanced heart disease. Because if you have heart disease or vascular disease anywhere, you have it everywhere. And the arteries in the penis are smaller, except for the 6 guys in this room. Exception, but in general, they're going to be smaller than, say, the ones in the larger veins like your heart and stuff like that. So you don't need to take a blue pill, which, believe it or not, men in their 20s now are already getting impotent because of their diet. You just need to eat a green leaf. So that's usually how we get men to eat healthy, or we tell them about this new movie, Game Changers, with all the athletes that are now doing extraordinary things on a plant-based diet. But you don't need a blue pill, you need a green leaf, because vegan is the new Viagra. So don't eat oil. I've taught you, so many of the chefs have taught you, you can cook, you can bake, you can air fry, you can do everything without oil. You don't need it. There's going to be a reason that you like it so much, which we'll get to very soon in the brain chemistry part, which is why it's hard for people to get rid of. Now, the thing is oil actually coats the taste buds of your tongue. And when you use oil, you got to use a lot more salt. People say, I'm Greek, olive oil's in my blood, I'm Italian. Well, when these people come to me as private clients, I actually pour it in a glass and I say, well, then just have a cup, and they won't drink it. You know what will happen if you drink olive oil straight? You will vomit. It's an emetic at high doses, as is salt. So it's pretty gross. It has no taste unto itself. People say, well, I love bread dipped in olive oil. Well, yeah, you love the bread, because what they did in the brachial artery tourniquet test is they measured the blood pressure of these healthy young college subjects, and it was normal. And so then what they did is they gave them a test meal, like cornflakes, something neutral. And of course, it was wide open. It was fine. Then they gave them a meal at McDonald's, and the brachial artery constricted. And when you eat a high-fat meal, it will constrict for like 6 hours, at which time that's when you could have a heart attack or a stroke. The blood pressure resumed to normal. And then they fed them bread dipped in olive oil. And they found that the olive oil constricted the brachial artery to the same degree as the olive oil. There's nobody here to stir the Brussels sprouts. Who has an air fryer that can? Somebody's here? Hey, would you mind taking a spatula and just opening it and stirring it so that it doesn't? Thank you. So oil, no oil. Oil is for cars. Now people say, but coconut oil, paleo, coconut oil. Coconut oil is 92% saturated fat. It's higher in saturated fat than lard. If there's anything, guys, think about it. If there's anything healthy in olive oil or flax oil or coconut oil, wouldn't it be in the olive, in the coconut, in the flaxseed? Olives are only about 400 calories a pound, but when you process in an olive oil, it's now 4,000 calories a pound. When you process a food, you make it calorie rich and nutrient poor. Corn is 500 calories a pound. Turn it into corn oil, and it's it has to close absolutely perfectly. You might have to anybody have this particular air fryer at home? Thank you. It's got to be just so. So don't eat oil. Don't eat oil. Now, if you eat at other people's houses, except for where we went last night, if you eat at restaurants, it's going to be pretty hard not to eat oil because it's in everything. And it really, you'll find that the food actually tastes better without it. But there's a reason you like it, just like with the cheese, which we're going to get to. You know, when I stopped eating oil, sugar, salt, it was August 1st, 2008, because I actually heard this lecture by Dr. Esselstyn. And even though I was still overweight at the time, he made a compelling argument in having so many people in my family already dying from heart disease. I figured, why not eat in a manner that's going to make me bulletproof against heart disease? Well, I was a chef, and not using oil was actually the easiest because really, like in a soup recipe, most soup recipes will tell you to saute the onion in 4 tablespoons of olive oil. Nobody could tell the difference. I would do side by side in classes, and they would pick the one they liked better. It was never the one with the oil. Because when you cook with oil, sugar, and salt, it actually dissipates. If you are going to use these things, you want to use them in what we call the finish. If you want to absolutely, I mean, I don't want you to do this, but Dr. McDougall says if you want to sprinkle some sugar and salt on your food, you do it afterwards. You don't cook with it. And it's not that you would sprinkle oil on the food, but the thing is you really can't taste it when it's in a recipe anyway. So that's that. And plus we did delicious dressings without it. You have all the vinegars. So it's very easy from a culinary standpoint to cook and bake without oil. Not from a brain chemistry standpoint, but I'm saving that brain chemistry part for the end. Yeah. Salt. Those of you that aren't, I don't, maybe Gustavo will take a picture. We have all these salt-free seasonings lined up. I think I showed you some, my favorite being Benson's Table Tasty. You know, we're genetically hardwired to prefer the taste of sugar, fat, and salt for survival. But our ancestors got it in whole natural food. So they got their sugar from fruit. They got their fat from nuts and avocados, which were seasonal. And they got their salt from eating vegetables. You see, we have taste buds on the tip of our tongue for sweet and salty. And we crave salt because that was in order to prevent dehydration for our ancestors, because they didn't have Kangen water delivered to their house. They drank from strivers. That's a stream and a river combined. They drank from rivers and streams that often became polluted. So in order to prevent dehydration, they always preferred things that had the most sodium, which were green vegetables. Well, most people don't eat any vegetables in our country, or they eat like 3% of their calories from vegetables. They eat less than 10% from fruits and vegetables. So it's normal for us to crave foods that are salty, but we don't have to get it from the salt shaker. Americans get more of their salt, believe it or not, from processed food than even from the salt shaker. And you get more of it actually in things like bread, where it's hidden, than from things like potato chips and French fries, where it's on the surface. So if you absolutely have to use salt, and you can't use any of these wonderful substitutes or just use more herbs and spices, then what you want to do is just sprinkle it at the end and get the most expensive salt you can so that you will use less of it. And people say, well, what about Celtic salt or Himalayan? It has minerals. Yeah, well, so do vegetables. You don't want to have to use a chemical like salt, which is a very powerful appetite stimulant, which if you're overweight or trying to lose weight is horrible because it will cause you to eat more food in general and then crave sweet. Now, what I do for people, what I've done in previous classes, or people that are just struggling so much that can't eat the food as delicious as it was today, is I recommend a couple of substitutes. And by substitutes, I don't mean like the fake salt, potassium chloride, but these are interim things, which if Bailey wasn't on my lap, I'd grab. One is called raw coconut aminos. It's a gluten-free, soy-free soy sauce made of coconut sap and sea salt. So instead of having 2,300 milligrams of sodium for 1 teaspoon, it has 95. So you could have 24 teaspoons for the same amount, but you would never use that much. There are also 2 brands of low sodium miso, Cold River and South Mountain, that have 110 milligrams of sodium per teaspoon instead of 2,300. You only need about 500 milligrams of sodium per day for bodily functions. And if you eat enough whole natural food like we serve today, you get plenty. If you're outside, if you sweat a lot, you're an athlete, you could argue you could use more. Now, you can also get it from things like kelp and dulse and nori and kombu, sea vegetables. We have kelp and dulse over there. What I like to eat, because I'm not eating iodized salt or any salt, so to make sure I get my iodine, is a few times a week I eat something called smoked applewood dulse that actually tastes like bacon, and it's really, really salty. If you don't already have heart disease or high blood pressure, I know that salt is the hardest of sugar, oil, flour, alcohol, and salt for most people to get rid of. And so, you know, that might be something you can visit like later on. But the truth is if you can go 30 days without adding any salt to your food, it starts tasting really good without it. You can start tasting how salty things like chard and celery taste. And the truth is I was talking to Robbie Barbero yesterday, a guy from the Mindful Diabetic who eats a raw diet, but basically eats like me, no added fats and no oil or sugar or flour or salt. And we were, and people at the party were saying, oh, but Dr. McDougall and Dr. Rivera say is a little bit's okay. Yes, it may be okay for your health, but if you're a food addict or overweight, it's not such a great thing. But what you don't understand is because you can't feel what it's like to be in my brain or taste in my mouth. When you stop using these chemicals like sugar, oil, and salt that fool your brain satiety mechanisms that cause you to exponentially overeat and keep you stuck in the pleasure trap, we actually enjoy our food more. I mean, we have foodgasms every single meal because we're not relying on these chemicals. So there's salt. Okay, sugar. I saved the worst for last. And by the worst, it maybe isn't the worst. Probably oil is the worst for your health. But for me, as somebody who was a sugar addict, it was. You know, I was teaching at a college in, can't think of the name of the town in Georgia. It was about an hour or two away from Atlanta. And it was, I think it was called Darton College, and it had a lot of nurses there. And people in the South are, you know, we have about a 40% obesity rate in this country right now. 3/4 of Americans are overweight, about 40% are obese. And the South is really, really struggling with their obesity rates. And I was there to try to help the food service in the college, like use less salt. I mean, their low sodium thing was like more sodium than I would eat for a week. And the guy there that was in charge, Reggie, said, well, you know, he was real proud of his work. And he says, I make the best sweet tea in the South. Well, I never have sweet. Oh, that was his name. It wasn't you, Reggie, but yeah, there is a Reggie here. But no, his name was really Reggie. And I'm not making that up. I mean, because if I was going to make up a name, I probably would have said like Vladimir. Or, you know, he really was named Reggie. Really lovely guy. I had never had sweet tea. And I had stopped eating sugar, but at that point, I wasn't as good as not offending. I was so worried about offending him, so I did take a sip. I took this thing called sweet tea, and after like many years without sugar, I spit it out. It was like when I was a little kid and would go to a restaurant with my parents, I would put sugar in the water, and it's just what it tasted like. But what was really interesting is that at the college, the sugar came in packets like this. I never saw them like this. And I realized the reason they put them like this is because it made it a lot easier to have it like this. Now, I'm going to go back to sugar, but there was one thing I forgot to say about oil, and this is very interesting, especially if you're somebody that's trying to lose weight. I get clients that are often much thinner than I am, but they're actresses and models, and they literally have to lose, like the director says, your face looks fat in that light. And like they got to lose, I'm not kidding you, like I can't tell you their names, but like these are people that are practically anorexic that are told if they don't lose 5 pounds, they can't work. So, but they don't eat this way. But what the good news is I teach them this diet. And the first thing we do is we take them off oil and like cheese, which is like the highest source of the saturated fat in our diet. And they do actually, you know, especially we take them off the alcohol too. But the point is the thing about oil that's interesting is oil is insidious. It slips under the radar undetected by your mechanisms of satiety, the stretch, nutrient, and calorie receptors. Are you here by any chance? Could you show them the magnets? Could you pass around the 2 magnets on the fridge, the ones with the stomachs and the ones with calorie density? So when I went SOS free August 1st, 2008, I just stopped using sugar, oil, and salt. And it wasn't hard for me as a chef, and I actually liked the food better. I didn't tell Charles, my husband, because he doesn't make the food or buy the food. I make his breakfast, I send him to work with his lunch, and I make the dinner. So, and he didn't notice any difference. So about 7 months after stopping sugar, oil, and salt, he had to go to a bar mitzvah, and he doesn't normally wear a suit or a belt. And he went to put his belt on, and now he couldn't, there was no holes. It was way too big. And he's like, oh my God, I must have cancer. I'm dying. And I'm like, just calm down. We just haven't eaten oil in 7 months. And he lost 8 pounds in 7 months. Now, he didn't even know about this experiment. He was being experimented on against his knowledge. If somebody, and he was 5'6" and 160 pounds, he lost 8 pounds. Now on Ultimate Weight Loss, he doesn't need to lose weight, but he's barely 140 because just he can't, you know, he can't keep weight on eating the way that we tell people to eat for weight loss. But the point is if somebody that doesn't want to lose weight, that doesn't need to lose weight, can lose that much weight just by stopping oil, imagine what we all could do if we actually did it on purpose. But the problem is with restaurants, I've worked with restaurants, and there's a few that I can mention in LA where you can get oil-free. There's some entrees at Hugo's you can get oil-free, and I work with Sharky's. You can get the AJ burrito bowl or plate that's oil-free, and you can get flame broiler. But other than that, there's always going to be residual oil, and if you insist on eating restaurants, it's going to be hard. So back to sugar, the thing that caused me to be fat and sick at such a early age and almost have cancer. So, okay, so the Brussels sprouts are ready. That's going to be my, nobody's going to have mine. Okay, I really, is there anybody here that knows me well? I don't share food. I don't know if you've ever noticed that about me, but Shada once took an air fried fry off my plate and I almost killed her. I got this. I'm like Bailey. It's like, I will share my toys, but don't touch my food. Okay. I really am. It's not a good thing if you ever saw me, but I really don't like to share food. Anyway, my body, I will freely share with all of you here. No, just kidding. Oh, look, my hat just fell down. Look what this says, by the way. Oh yeah. Let's give these people the muffins. I didn't swear. I'm wearing the hat. Okay. What are we talking about now? Oh, sugar. Okay. Now, I don't like talking about animal experimentation, and JP gets mad at me, but this study was so compelling that especially parents here that are feeding their kids sugar, because most of us are pretty much screwed anyway. Let's face it. You know, we have a lifetime of this. It's going to be really hard for us to change. But if you haven't had a kid yet, don't fuck them up by giving them sugar and giving them dairy. Just those two things. So I believe this was done, I think it was Serge Ahmed in Paris. I'm not sure if it's script, but they did a study with rats where they took a group of rats and they tried to addict them to two white powders, either cocaine or sugar. Now, I don't recommend you eat any powders, sugar, flour, salt, rat poison. So they gave them unlimited access to either cocaine or sugar. And 96% of the rats chose one white powder over the other. Can you guess what they chose? Sugar. Right. They chose, it's sugar. They chose sugar. Now, what they did is they upped the ante in the experiment by putting electrodes on the rat's paws. And if the rat tried to get the cocaine or the sugar, they would be given a painful electric shock where their paws would bleed. Every cocaine-addicted rat, once they got the shock, retreated and decided it wasn't worth it to go after the cocaine anymore. But every sugar-addicted rat was willing to continually have his foot burned and bloodied to keep eating the sugar. And when they used like the fake sugar, it was actually even worse. The fake sugar, guys, is even worse. I'll talk about that in a minute, both for weight loss and health. They decided to try to reverse the addiction by substituting for the cocaine and sugar rat chow, the diet consistent with the species' natural history. That's the cinnamon bun. After a brief period of detoxification and withdrawal, every single cocaine-addicted rat was willing to eat the rat chow and survive. But every sugar-addicted rat refused to eat the rat chow and chose to starve themselves to death instead of eating the rat chow. And so you tell me that sugar's not addictive? Well, studies, brain scans, MRIs are showing it's as or more addictive than cocaine or heroin. And most people are starting every day with mega doses of this poison and feeding it to their children like it's okay. Well, it's not okay. So, oh, look at how cute you are. She's taking it home. Cute. Well, I'm sure we have foil. I can tell you where it is. It's underneath that. Is there anybody, Elizabeth, that is so beautiful the way you guys are eating with a fork. I never have done that. I mean, I've done it in my life, but like that, if you could see these lovely people here, the way they're eating it, like it's something to be savored instead of like me and Gustavo. But are you guys enjoying that though? It's pretty good, right? Yeah, I'm so proud of this class because I was teaching, and I'll get back to the sugar, don't worry. I was teaching recipes that were more transitional for years, but they weren't true to me. And I'm glad that the way that I really eat, you don't think sucks. So back to the rats and the sugar. So again, it's put in everything from baby formula to geriatric formula, and it's really addictive. And I know that a lot of the plant-based doctors say it's okay. And yes, it's okay. People can reverse their heart disease and maybe even some other diseases with a little bit of sugar and salt and flour. But you're not going to reverse food addiction with it, and you're never going to lose the desire for it if you keep eating it. So now let's talk about my favorite thing, my favorite organ, the brain. And we'll get back to why people like oil so much when oil doesn't really taste good by itself. There's a neurotransmitter that's produced in the brain anytime you have a pleasurable experience. And that neurotransmitter is called, one person knows? A neurotransmitter produced in the brain whenever you have a pleasurable experience. You can say it. Dopamine. I actually wear earrings usually that are the chemical symbol for dopamine. So anything that's pleasurable will cause a release of dopamine. And the two most pleasurable experiences for most species are food and sex, or as Dr. Lisle says, if you're a man, sex and food. So the thing is that's why I told you at the beginning, I'd never take sex away from you. As a matter of fact, I'd like you to have more sex so that you can get dopamine that way and rely on it less with the food. Those of you who are here in person may notice that 2 seats are now taken up by the fact that I have my own spin bike. Seriously, you exercise, maybe it's not dopamine, but the chemicals you get from vigorous exercise are amazing. And they say that we never really overcome one addiction. We just switch it for another. And I lost all the weight I lost, these 50 pounds, without exercise. But I exercise now because it's basically an antidepressant, an anti-anxiety medicine. I don't need Ambien. It's really one of the best things you can do. And you really feel really good in your brain when you do it. However, back to the eating part. So eating anything, even kale at 100 calories per pound, all eating stimulates the production of this neurotransmitter that makes us feel pleasure in the brain, even kale at 100 calories per pound. But the more concentrated the calories, the higher the calories, the more dopamine is released in the brain. So we perceive that we like this food better. We say that it tastes better, when in reality, it's just because it's more of a drug. We get high from it. So really, nobody likes the taste of olive oil by itself. But at 4,000 calories a pound, you're getting 40 times more dopamine than you would from eating vegetables. Now, a lot of people are chronically stressed. They're not doing anything to mitigate the stress. They're not doing anything like prayer or meditation or volunteer work or exercise. A lot of people have addiction somewhere in their family of drugs or alcohol or food, so they already have the DRD2 or other genes that show that they have addictive tendencies. They're born with what's called low D2 receptivity, so they produce less dopamine in the brain. They've been addicts for a long time, which means their dopamine receptors are already not working to the fullest extent. And so it's, of course, they're looking for the highest hit of dopamine they can get, which are the foods of the higher caloric density, which is what I call the foods to the right of the red line. And they perceive them as tasting better and liking them better because they are producing more dopamine in the brain. So as soon as you realize that as human beings, we do everything to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and conserve energy, that is why we like these foods so much and why it's so difficult for us to give up these foods that keep us stuck in what Dr. Lisle and Dr. Goldhamer called the pleasure trap. So one more thing on this subject is, my mom was morbidly obese and died from complications of her morbid obesity, as did my brother, far too young, even though he was a medical doctor and graduated #1 in his class in Princeton. It doesn't matter how smart you are to necessarily solve this problem. But the thing is, my mom was always on a diet, Weight Watchers, take off pounds sensibly, shots of urine from pregnant women. And she just kept getting fatter and fatter. But, she weighed and measured her food on a plate, and she ate like these fake cheeses and all these things. One of the things you have to understand, and this is another reason why I want you guys to eat either 100% of your calories plant exclusive, which is my recommendation, or at least 90%, and not eat processed food, is because when I look at processed food or animal products, I see the same thing. And by that, I mean, if I were to have a white bagel or a white chicken breast, it's not even a moral judgment about eating animals. It's that I look at something that's really not food, that's more food-like, that is completely devoid of nutrients. Now, the most important components, one of the most important components in food, well, I said, of course, is the fiber in the water, which create bulk, which creates satiety, are the vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, antioxidants, and micronutrients. These are things that not only prevent these common diseases of lifestyle, but also can even reverse them in many cases. Well, animal products and processed food contain no micronutrients, no vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, antioxidants, and micronutrients, no fiber, no water. And so if you're eating 92% of your calories from these two categories, as most Americans are, you're eating a diet that's completely devoid of fiber and completely devoid of nutrients. Well, the problem is we have these things called the mechanisms of satiety lining our digestive tracts in our brain. We have these receptors for nutrients, for calories, and for stretch. Well, the stretch ones are in the stomach. Well, if you watch a show called My 600-Pound Life, you'll notice that what these people are eating are not the food we serve today. They're basically eating pizza and soda, fried chicken, things like that. And the truth is they are hungry because they're starving on a cellular level from actual micronutrients that they're not getting from the processed food and animal products. And so the thing is that you could say, oh, well, they just have self-control problems. No, they have nutrient problems because they're eating a diet that's completely devoid of fiber and nutrients. And so they really never feel full, and they never will. And then unfortunately get their stomach butchered and mutilated, and now they really have to eat small portions, and so they're still always hungry. But the thing is anytime you eat these foods devoid of fiber and nutrients, you're going to have to overeat on calories. You're going to have to eat much more food because you just can't get full on animal products and processed food because they have no fiber, because they have no nutrients. And I've been passing around a magnet, hopefully, of 3 stomachs, which show the difference between eating oil, animal products, and the food we ate today. The food we ate today is completely going to fill your stomach up with less calories because you're going to activate the stretch nutrient and calorie receptors. Can't do that with animal processed food. Oil especially is insidious, and it slips under the mechanism undetected by any of our mechanisms association. And they've actually done studies where they've fed people a meal they make at home, like a pasta with a marinara, like in my book on processed and steamed vegetables, a nice big plate of food for 500 calories, and made the same plate of food with oil the way they do at a restaurant, like a cup of oil in the sauce and glug, 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 the oil and the salt and the pasta, and then maybe more in the vegetables. So the same dish at a restaurant that you eat at home would have 500 calories more from oil, but the subjects did not detect any more fullness from the oil. So that's the problem. Did I forget any part of my lecture? I think I got it all. We're going to do a closing number. And then of course I live here, so we're happy to take questions. I'm trying to think if I forgot this. This is my favorite lecture to give, and I don't give it anywhere. I never give it at a seminar, only in this class. Rebecca, are you here? Did I forget anything? Okay. Well, I think sugar, oil, salt. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we are going to end with a musical number called Whole Foods Will Keep Us Together. I had the privilege of singing this for John Mackey. So guys, here, the take-home message is that I want you guys to eat your food. Yes, whole, good. And not eat your food. Exactly. So that's the thing. Wherever you are in your journey to optimal health, just because you can't do everything doesn't mean you shouldn't do anything. And any steps you take, any changes you make incrementally over time, unless of course like you're under the threat of a surgeon's knife or have cancer, is going to make a difference. So that's the take-home message. Whether you eat animal products or not, nobody needs to be eating processed food, but please stop dairy. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for coming to my class. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for coming to my class. Thank you, 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 thank you. Oh, I fell down. Oh my God. God's creatures, stop and let them be your teachers. Eat with your heart and let love feed us again. Double lap dance for the first time. It was perfect. Thank you so much. Hey, you actually turned red. Love these guys. All right. Oh. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, peace begins on your plate. Namaste. Thank you guys. Woo. All right.